Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the Elevating Trust and Legitimacy for Prosecutors webinar. My name is Eric Landon. I'm a program manager here at the Association of Prosecuting Attorneys. The APA is a private, not-for-profit located in Washington, D.C., serving prosecutors as well as their law enforcement and community partners. Thank you for joining this webinar on gun diversion within the prosecutor's office. The points of view or opinions in this presentation are those of the presenter and do not necessarily represent the official position or policies of the Association of Prosecuting Attorneys. Just some quick housekeep before we do introductions. If you have a question for the presenter, please use the questions and answers widget, which is on the bottom of the screen. We will hold the question until the end of the presentation, at which time the presenter will address them. If you're having any technical difficulties or questions such as audio or video issues, please use the chat box also found at the very bottom of the screen. And if you don't see the little button that says chat, you could find it where it says more with the 3 dots. Then if you click that, you could see the little chat box. And we'll be happy to assist you with any issues that you may be encountering, from quality to sound issues or anything like this. So with that, we have our APA fellow, Joy, on the call, as well as we have the attorney offices of St. Paul and Columbus. So with that, I will hand over the webinar to Joy.
Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome from Chicago, which is where I'm located right now. I am a prosecutor fellow with the Association of Prosecuting Attorneys, and it was my job to work with both offices, both St. Paul and Columbus, fellow Midwesterners, which was really nice, on working with them for them to start their own gun diversion programs in their respective cities. And the issues with gun diversion, of course, is guns are a big topic now, increase in violence. We have problems now as prosecutors, as we're not always looked upon as the good guys in the white hat anymore, and we've had some image issues. And yet we as prosecutors all across the country have worked very hard to reach out to communities and to try to be creative in different ways of prosecuting cases that might be able to be prosecuted in new ways, as opposed to let's put someone on probation or send them to prison if they violate probation. So these two offices were very willing and very able about thinking outside the box and starting to look at what could they do about starting a gun diversion program, which would not only benefit the participant, but also potentially benefit the community and others. And hopefully you never see that participant ever again in the criminal justice system, which is really the goal, to get them while they're early on and don't become career criminals. So anyway, this I'm taking a sort of 3,500. I think that's how high we were as I was flying back from Denver and Montana yesterday. 3,500 feet view of the process, and then you'll hear from both St. Paul and Columbus about what their specific programs were like individually. But what I did was there were 2 different offices coming with 2 different backgrounds, 2 different kinds of laws, 2 different relationships with their various police departments. One very close, one a little less close, and pulling everyone together to make sure that we can all work in pulling in the same direction. So, Eric, how do I move this screen on? Oh, here we go. The first thing that you're going to need to do for your office, because presuming you're all prosecutors that are signing up, guns can be a very tricky thing nowadays. Something bad happens, and who's the first person they're going to look at? Or maybe you're the second person they're going to look at. How did this person get out there and they had a gun and yet they did these terrible things? How did that office screw up? Well, sometimes it has nothing to do with how the office screws up, but maybe you need to be prepared for that so you can set the right goals so you get the right people. How do you set those goals? You're going to set the goals for your office. Who are you looking to work with? What kinds of people are you hoping to divert from your criminal justice system that you are working under, and to make them whole again, if as best you can? You're also going to be setting your goals for the participant. What are you hope happens for each participant? And of course, just as each one of us comes in, like, for example, me, I'm good at many things. Do not ask me for directions or to explain geometry, but I have many weaknesses that I could use some strengthening on to make me a stronger, better person. What are those goals you're going to set with for the participant? And finally, setting your goals for the community. If you're not bringing in the community and strengthening the community, well, you're kind of missing the boat on being a leader for the people that you are really working for, which is your local neighbors and whoever was that voted you in or helped to get you put into office. So the first thing to do is set what your goals are. After you set your goals, this can be a little more confusing. We thought sometimes you think it's going to be easier than you think, but you need to establish a case flow. Each step of the case from when a participant starts to when a participant ends. Now, the problem is not each participant that starts is going to successfully finish. So you're going to have various points where, as they're going on this nice even flow, hopefully to the end of your program, what happens if they screw up? Do they get referred back? Do they get kicked out? Whatever. But each step has to be there from the point of stop by the police to the point of finish the whole program, or if they don't finish the program. And in establishing this case flow, it's extremely important that you be transparent. Be transparent with your partners, with your office, with the community, and for sure with the participant and the participant's attorney, so that they know what to expect as they're moving forward. After you establish that case flow in your office, you are going to need to really spend time with your partnerships. All kinds of cases, it's really important to work closely with your partners, but particularly with a gun diversion program, one of your closest, if not your closest partner, is going to be your police. So if you don't have a good relationship with your police, now's a good time to bring them in and be very frank as to why you haven't worked well together. Start small. Start with a couple of partners, couple police officers. And if you've worked with police officers on this program for a long time, bring them in and meet with them to talk about those case flows and what the goals might be. Listen to what your partners have to say. And that goes from the police to the judges, to anyone that's going to be a part of this. Of course, it's going to be judges. They're going to want to know what's happening to the cases or other stages. It's really important for them to believe that you're listening. So if I'd make a strong suggestion, when you present your goals and your case flow to your partners, I think it's really important to the top of your piece of paper where it says goals or case flow, you write draft, because that lets your partners know you're meeting them with an open mind. You're going to listen to them because they're going to have suggestions that you don't have because they're coming at it from a different perspective. And that way it makes you and gives you an opportunity to make changes to make your program even better. So those partnerships are crucial. As part of your program, I really think if you want to assist the participant, some people call them a defendant, participant I think is a little more accurate. It's really important to have some kind of needs assessment. We have a variety at the APA if you would like to use some, but the needs assessment can be really important to figure out what it is that they need to keep them out of the criminal justice system by improving their lives. Do they need mental health treatment? Are they addicted or using too much alcohol and other drugs? Do they have life challenges? Are they couch surfing because they don't have anywhere to live? Do they have bad relations with their families? Or do they not even have any sorts of insurance? Do they have food quality or even any food at all? All of these things can make it difficult for a person to participate in a program and be successful when they have these life challenges. Or on top of that, and you don't need to move back here, just leave it on this. These needs assessments can let you know, what do I need to make sure that this participant's receiving the need, having their needs met that they need met. Well, that was hard to say. How you're going to do this needs assessment and quality use of what to have each person to meet their needs. Use a navigator or an arbitrator or someone separate from you. That person can work with the participant, give them the assessment themselves, conduct that assessment, and coordinate with your other partners, because those other partners are going to include people in the community. maybe people who provide employment opportunities, or people who provide the drug treatment or alcohol treatment, or employment training, or housing, or food. That navigator or arbitrator, and St. Paul is very different from Columbus, as you'll hear, can help us not just assess, but move the participant in the directions they need to go. Because you, as a prosecutor, you're not going to have time. You're busy, you have more to do than you have time to do. So you work closely with that navigator or arbitrator to work them into where they need to go. So community partners. Those community partners, you're going to have different ones depending on where they're from. They're going to be the ones that meet the participants' needs. So, for example, when I visited St. Paul, it was really great to meet those people in charge of what we would call in Chicago circle keepers. They're the ones that run the community aspect, which I'm sure St. Paul will talk about. They understand what that participant needs, and part of what that participant needs is to feel part of a community. A lot of the people who pick up these lower level cases or a gun case haven't really felt a part of the community or even understand how their actions or inactions affect the rest of the community. Those community partners are also important because they can support the program, whether it's the police out there, talking to juveniles or young adults who just screwed up and trying to get them into the program, or you out there talking to community leaders and members as to what you do. Supporting that program will help you to grow the program as you get more people involved, even from things like employment or treatment, or if you decide to have community intervention or community impact panels. It's really, really important with those community partners that you thank them regularly and formally, not just every time they help you, but at the end of the year. Send them a formal letter with the top prosecutor on there. Lindsay from St. Paul, or Zach from Columbus, so they know that the head person has read about the work that they've done. You can even have them out for a luncheon or give them certificates, so those community partners know that what they've done has made a difference. Because the better buy-in you get from the community partners, the stronger your cases are going to be. You have your community partners, your participants gone through and hasn't had to go back to court. It's really important when you think about some of these participants, not all, but some of these participants have never, ever gone through any kind of formal graduation of any sort, whether it's high school, whether it's college, whether it's even 8th grade. Couple things are important for them completing and taking that final step. You need to conduct a final assessment. To find out what from that initial assessment has changed. Even if those changes, are only micro changes, you can at least find out how they fared. Do they now have a place to sleep every night? Or do they feel their family relationships are even better? Those are things that can't necessarily be measured in any way other than small ways, but you need to have that final assessment that somebody does for them. Always, too, at the end of that final assessment, give some room for them to give their own input on whatever it is they want to say. It's really important for them to feel that they have really participated and that you care what it was that they thought about your program. They might give you really good ideas of something to add, or they might say, hey, this thing didn't work. Well, they're the ones going through it. It'd be really nice to find out what they have to think. Program completion, if you can, and your state allows it. I think pursuing sealing and expungement is really important. If we're really serious about giving someone a second chance, I think sealing and expungement is important so that employers who are looking don't prevent them from getting a job or coming into their educational program because of something stupid that they did that they've now not just paid for, but also have learned from. And I don't mean paid for financial, I mean paid for because they've had to participate in a program that they might not necessarily have. I think it's also really important at the program completion is you commemorate their completion. I talked about commemorate for your community partners. It's especially important for the participant to be commemorated. I know that was one of the things we did a lot in every program we did in my home city of Chicago. Each person for whatever program we were doing got a certificate. And for some of them, they'd never had a certificate before. And now they realize, especially at the end, this was important enough for them to have a certificate signed by the lead person. And that's really, really important for them. It makes them feel important, and it makes them realize, hey, this was really a pretty significant thing that I got through. So you completed the program. What are the final steps? Make any necessary changes as you go along. This is nothing that's written in stone. For Pete's sake, if things were written in stone, we still would be, I guess, in caves and barely lighting fires. We need to move forward as people who are looking for new ways of doing things, trying different things. Is something going to get screwed up? Yeah, I bet something gets screwed up. What doesn't get screwed up occasionally? But more importantly, you're going to find out some things that you can do to make things better. And the better results you have for each individual, long term, the better results you're going to have for your own community. So you've got to be willing to make those changes that your participant or your community partners say that you should make. Final steps, and this is something that you need to figure out based upon your laws and how you want to do your program. How are you going to dispose of that gun, and who you're going to have doing that if you're going to have the gun be disposed? Or if you decide to return the gun to the participant, how is that gun going to be returned? What are the procedures for that and the paperwork that's necessary? Of course, if we didn't have paperwork, we wouldn't really be prosecutors. So disposing or returning the gun, you need the paperwork to make sure everyone, participant and defense attorney, understand that. And finally, reach out with questions. No one knows everything. And for God's sakes, we're not each on an island. Pick up the phone, send an email. You might find out people have faced the same thing as you, or you've never thought of this before. You know, at the end of this program, reach out to Jess, reach out to Jonica or Justin or Joe or Jen. Really, if they have the name Jay, it means they're especially good. So don't hesitate to reach out. Thank you for your time.
Thank you so much for that overview, Joy. It was really great to hear all of your processes and things like this. Up next, we're going to have St. Paul City's Attorney Office present next. So I will hand over the webinar to them.
Great, thank you, Eric. If you can pull up our slides as I get rolling here, that would be great. So my name is Jessica McConaughey, and I am the Deputy City Attorney at the St. Paul City Attorney's Office in the Criminal Division. Also on the call with me from my office today is Jonica Carr, one of our prosecutors who has been involved not only in our gun diversion program, but has also been involved heavily with our Elevating Trust and Legitimacy for Prosecutors Procedural Justice project, which many of you may have tuned in last week for last week's webinar. So, okay, go ahead for the next slide there, Eric. So as we're going to chat here a little bit, just a little bit of an overview. What we were asked to talk about is basically where were we at before we started our gun diversion program. Talk a little bit about our beginnings, why we wanted to do this work. Talk about our stakeholders, both internal and external, and also our partnerships. Talk about case flow and goals, where we are today, and where does the future take us. I'm going to talk about the early beginnings, and then turn it over to Jonica after a few slides. So go ahead, Eric. Next slide, please. Yes, just a little bit about the St. Paul City Attorney's Office so we can kind of set the groundwork here. St. Paul City Attorney's Office, we're located in St. Paul, Minnesota. We are the second largest municipal law office in the state of Minnesota. Only second to our counterparts over at the Minneapolis City Attorney's Office, which is across the river, who incidentally have also initiated a gun intervention program. My office, the St. Paul City Attorney's Office, we are responsible for prosecuting all petty misdemeanor, and gross misdemeanor crimes that occur within the city of St. Paul. And the reason that I try to, I want to just call that out a little bit is because I know several people on the call might come from jurisdictions where your primary work is in felonies, and maybe you do felonies and misdemeanors, and if your state also has gross misdemeanors. But in the state of Minnesota, it's the county attorney's office who is responsible for felony prosecution. So the reason that that's important to this discussion is because that also helped inform how we created our program. On average, the St. Paul City Attorney's Office, we prosecute approximately 10,000 to 12,000 criminal cases a year. That's a lot of cases in 1 year. Based on the numbers, the last several years, there has been an uptick in weapons charges that we are seeing. And on average, approximately 1,500, we prosecute approximately 1,500 weapons cases per year, which by my lawyer math suggests somewhere over 10% of our cases. So there was a real need to take a look at this area. Okay. So the creation of the program. The creation of the program actually started in early 2021. We had started to have some discussions within our office of how can we help young nonviolent gun offenders who have clean records. How can we help them when they have their first interaction with the criminal justice system, and how do we help them so that this is their only interaction, and hopefully that they don't come back. This philosophy and this thought went right along with our work in the areas that we do and philosophy with alternative prosecution programs that my office does, as well as our philosophy of individualized justice. For many years, we have engaged in the work of treatment courts, all across the board there, of diversion programs, of other restorative justice programs. So that was kind of the framework that we started looking at this particular issue. Lo and behold, in February of 2021, our closest law enforcement partners, the St. Paul Police Department, was actually the catalyst. They had reached out to us and really wanted to have these discussions because what they were seeing was not only an increase in gun violence in St. Paul, but they were also seeing an increase in gun possession crimes with young male individuals who this seemed to be their first contact with the criminal justice system. So they were really interested in trying to find a way, how can we support these individuals who are at risk, who are nonviolent gun offenders, so that they do not become involved in this cycle of crime. Was also through those discussions that we learned, and maybe we knew this, but we learned further that sometimes residents might carry guns for reasons other than commission of a crime. And so we had to kind of take a look at that, and that also helped to guide our discussion as we were looking and creating this program. Okay. Next slide, please. All right, so who are our stakeholders? Joy also already referred to our city attorney, Lindsay Olson. She was a big champion of this at the front end, engaged with us, engaged with our law enforcement partners, namely St. Paul. I note that Lindsay is appointed by the mayor. I know there are some folks on the call who might be the elected official and are thinking about this program. We engaged Mayor Carter and his administration early on to give the philosophy of why we wanted to do work in this area and what that work might look like. Our number one justice law enforcement partner was St. Paul Police. And again, the discussions started with them in earnest, and it came with some of their heads of their major crimes department and their gangs and guns. And they were the individuals who identified this and said, hey, how can we help these individuals so that they don't become embroiled in the criminal justice system? Fortunately, one of the individuals that had also started with us in our early conversations is now the chief of police here in St. Paul, and he is very supportive of this work, and we feel fortunate to have brought him in at those early discussions. We also reached out to our justice partners. We wanted to let our judges know what we were doing. We reached out to public defenders because they too were going to be involved in this once we started rolling this out. And people, they would see it whether in the courtroom, either at that first appearance or somewhere down the line. And if we were trying to divert people from that ultimate guilty plea, they needed to know what was going on. We also engaged our pretrial services and diversion agency because those are the individuals that are actually helping to support us and the individuals that come through this program in order to support them while they're on diversion, help with the risk needs assessment, help with providing resources and guiding them through that. So we had to bring those individuals into our conversation as well. We also were fortunate to be able to reach out and work with our community-based restorative justice agency, who was already helping us with another type of diversion program. And these folks from the Dispute Resolution Center are really skilled in the area of restorative justice circles. And the program that we ultimately set up for our gun diversion program does add the component of the restorative justice circle. So part of all this was really trying to leverage the relationships that we had and focus on the areas that we did have control over in our own little sphere of influence. Okay, thanks. Next one. Additional support. Sometimes timing is everything. So the reason I say that is because we had started our discussion with St. Paul Police and our partners in early to mid 2021. About the end of 2021, we also were fortunate to get involved with the Association of Prosecuting Attorneys for the Elevating Trust and Legitimacy for Prosecutors, the Procedural Justice Project. And as we started talking with them about the work of the Elevating Trust and Legitimacy Project, it naturally flowed into the work that we were doing in our gun diversion as we were just trying to build it and implement it. And fortunately, the APA is like, hey, we can be here to help you. So let us help you. That's how we were able to make connections with Joy, who has been with us both with the Elevating Trust and Legitimacy, but also the gun diversion program. It was also through those connections that we were able to connect with the Joyce Foundation. So just huge shout out there. Also the University of Chicago, who's been able to provide us with program evaluation and understanding our data. So again, it was where do those relationships lead us to, and who can help us in terms of developing, implementing, and hopefully expanding our program. So that was the history of how we got here. And at this point, I'm going to turn it over to Jonica.
Thank you, Jess. And Eric, we can go to the next slide. So I'm going to start talking about the goals, core principles, and expectations of our gun diversion program, and then get into a bit more of the specifics about what our gun diversion program is. So first, goals for our gun diversion program. Early intervention in the lives of what we've seen is mostly young, low-level, nonviolent gun offenders who have recently become involved in the criminal justice system. And that intervention for us is by offering them diversion, preferably at arraignment or as early as we can in the process, and eventual programming when appropriate. And so an alternative to conviction and sentencing. Next, and a large goal of our program is, instead of traditional prosecution, in this program, our goal was to provide a rehabilitative approach. So traditional prosecution would include sanctions, such as the arrest, conviction, incarceration, and probation, which often results in negative collateral consequences to these individuals in areas like employment, housing, education. and actually may lead these individuals to continued involvement in the criminal justice system, which is a negative impact on our community. So we really wanted to provide a rehabilitative approach to reducing these crimes in our community, and that's by addressing the root causes. Another goal is to hopefully identify and address factors that may contribute to the reasons why individuals are illegally possessing or using a firearm, whatever those reasons may be, and Jess kind of touched on it earlier. Oftentimes we've seen a lot of these individuals are carrying for protection. And so that was an important goal of our program. And last is utilizing those restorative justice circles to try and repair the harm that these types of offenses create in our community, and also, of course, promoting accountability and rehabilitation. Next, here are some of the core principles of the program that were part of the discussions that our team had when we were creating and developing this program. I won't speak about all of these, but I did want to highlight a few. One of the main principles and one of the ways that we think our program is unique is, as Jess touched on, our collaboration with law enforcement, specifically the St. Paul Police Department. And as Jess said, they actually brought this idea to our office because they saw a need for a program like this and for our community. And so the participants are vetted together with our office and St. Paul Police Department with the goal of really achieving a consensus in determining whether to refer someone to this program or not. Also, of course, providing meaningful support, reducing recidivism, and making sure a core principle is making sure that these participants who are successful in completing this program do not have a conviction for that gun crime on their record. Program expectations, addressing the root causes of the participants' conduct to hopefully assist them in avoiding future offenses. So we require participants to take that risk needs assessment to then determine appropriate and specific programming for them. I'll touch on that a little bit later. Another expectation is completion of certain required conditions. So separate from whatever that needs assessment would show us, they also have to agree to engage in that restorative justice circle. They have to commit to a 12-month period of participation, forfeit the weapon, and they have to remain law-abiding during that 12-month period. All right, next slide. And kind of now moving into a bit more of the specifics. First, when reviewing a potential case or matter for this program, we look at what the offense is. So here are some of the offenses that we consider for this program and ones that we do not. I will say a majority of the charges that we see, gun-related charges kind of as an office as a whole, and that we also accept into this program is that gross misdemeanor possession of a pistol without a permit. And then as Jess said, felonies are not considered as a part of this program because they're not in our jurisdiction. Next slide. So after we, there we go. After we determine that the offense is actually one that we would consider for the program, we then look at a lot of other things, right? Knowing kind of the risk that we're taking as an office and as a city in diverting gun cases, particularly when gun crimes are up. And so one of the main things that we look to first is this individual's criminal history. So do they have prior convictions for crimes of violence, sexual assault, domestic violence, crimes against children, gun crimes? Does their criminal history show a propensity towards violence? Is there past or present non-compliance with probation or pretrial release conditions? Are they currently being investigated for any crime? And this is where our great partnership with law enforcement has been extremely beneficial to this program and to referring the right people into it. They can and they do let us know if an individual is presently being investigated for certain crimes and then therefore wouldn't be a right fit for this program. And there's a lot of other factors. Sorry, not quite yet, Eric. You can go back. That we look to, but the next big thing would be the facts of the case before us. So was this individual significantly uncooperative with law enforcement during the stop and subsequent investigation? Were there any sort of gun intimidation or threats used in the present case? Was the gun stolen, etc.? And so there are certain things that are automatic disqualifiers that we've identified for this program and others that aren't necessarily automatic disqualifiers, but that we will take care to look into and discuss more as a team if that matter and individual is appropriate or not for the program. All right, now to the next slide. So let's say we refer an individual into the program at arraignment, best case, they accept the offer. So Justice Point is an agency that our county uses for pretrial release supervision, and presently they are the ones that supervise and monitor our gun diversion cases and participants as well. They also conduct that risk needs assessment with the participant, identify the appropriate programming conditions for them. And so they're a huge partner in this right now. In addition to the required conditions that I laid out earlier, some others could be treatment relating to mental health or substance use and abuse, cognitive skills programming, including decision-making around guns, engaging in job training opportunities, pain restitution, etc. Next slide. So I did want to briefly talk about one of those required conditions that Jess touched earlier in this presentation, and that is that participation in a restorative justice circle. We call this program at our office Ethos. It is run by our office in partnership with our local dispute resolution agency. Participants are required to sit in that restorative justice circle with community and with circle keepers. The circle keeper that does the circle specifically for our gun diversion participants has expertise and life experience unique to the cases that he's keeping the circle on, and he is formally justice involved. And we really believe that that has made a huge impact on a lot of our successful participants in gun diversion, is those communications and conversations with our main circle keeper. So they have to sit in that circle and then complete conditions as a part of an agreement that they come to with the community in that circle. Next slide. And so this is just a big flow chart that Joy was helpful in our office putting together. It's kind of the process and the program elements of our gun diversion program. And so obviously with successful completion, and once that 12-month period at a minimum is up, the case would then be dismissed for those successful participants. Next slide, I wanted to talk about some program stats. As you can see from our numbers, we have been extremely intentional with the cases that we have referred and accepted into this program, and we really have started slow. So we have 23 approved cases. As you can see, each year we have approved more and more. 11 of those individuals successfully completed the program and have not received any future criminal charges. So 0% recidivism in that regard. And then we've had 4 individuals terminated. 3 had picked up some new related charges. 1 unfortunately passed away. We have 5 that are active and in good standing, and then 3 that are pending an offer at a future court date. We also listed some of the demographics as it relates to those cases. All right, last slide, bringing us to the future of what our gun diversion program hopefully will be. So we want to expand both in the eligibility criteria and in the programming we offer participants. One of the big things relates to that programming we're hoping to make a part of our gun diversion program, and it's called Pathways, which is created by and is led by an incredible group of people at an organization called Urban Ventures. They actually are, they do it in Minneapolis right now, and Minneapolis has seen incredible success with the program. And so we're looking to bring them hopefully onto our side and help us with some of our programming. So they offer this national model at reducing recidivism, and they use a community-based approach as well as a cognitive behavioral approach to the curriculum that they offer participants. That includes a classroom and group component relating to anger management, understanding trauma, healthier thinking. There's a substance abuse component, an enrichment series, and that also is kind of a classroom group focused piece of the curriculum, where they talk about life planning, goals workshops, budgeting, career planning, etc. And so that's one of the areas that we really hope our gun diversion program can expand into. And then also looking to programming evaluation, beefing up our recidivism data and how we're collecting it. And then, of course, as always, securing additional funding and resources to help support the growth of our program. And I have a question slide. I don't know if we'll probably just wait till the end to answer any questions you have specific to us, and I will pass it off. Thanks for your time.
Thank you so much for that really in-depth and detailed description of, everything. It was really great to see everything from the risk assessment to, the requirements of the participation in the program and where the program wants to be. So with that, I will hand over the mic to Columbus.
Thank you. My name is Joe Gibson. I'm the chief prosecutor here in the city of Columbus. We have an elected city attorney here in the city of Columbus. He is Zach Klein. Our office has about 176 employees with about 90 in our criminal division. And we got into this because we were thankfully accepted into the same grant as St. Paul with the Elevating Trust and Legitimacy program, and Joy and others pitched to us, have you ever thought about gun diversion? And we said, no, we really haven't. But in our office, much like St. Paul, we handle misdemeanors. We handle all misdemeanors in the city of Columbus and a bunch of townships nearby. The county prosecutor, likewise here in Ohio, the county prosecutor in each county handles all the felony cases. We are a state that the legislature seems to want everyone to have guns at all times with no licenses or permits or anything like that. So there are not many laws that prohibit gun possession to begin with. Some of them are felonies. There are very few misdemeanors that are related to firearms, but that being said, we still wanted to figure out something to do with people who are committing misdemeanors that have firearms on them, or use misdemeanors or use guns to commit misdemeanor offenses. So we got started on this program, and I will turn it over to, with me is Jen Grant, who's the lead prosecutor for our procedural justice initiative, and Justin Hikes, who is the senior prosecutor in the criminal division. I believe Justin's going to go next, and then Jen will we'll discuss the specifics about our program.
Yeah, I guess, Eric, if you want to go forward a slide or two, Joe kind of covered that first slide there. One of the big things that we kind of had to go through was a lot of meetings with a lot of different groups to try to make sure that we were getting everybody that we needed to get on board with us. I'm sure, like a lot of jurisdictions, gun violence and gun issues have been a really big deal here in Columbus for the last few years. So getting Columbus Police on board was a big ask. It took a lot of meetings, a lot of sort of guarantees that the right kind of offenses were coming in, and we were keeping out the offenses that I think we were all sort of agreed don't deserve to go into a diversion program. Joe kind of touched on this, but we don't really have that many misdemeanor offenses, gun offenses in Ohio, and several of those involve, or like aggravated menacing, things like that, which we wouldn't want in this diversion program. So once we kind of got everybody on board that which offenses exactly were going to come in, I think that made it a lot easier. There were definitely a good many meetings to talk about all this stuff. Getting the defense bar on board wasn't that hard because it's another diversion type program. We're very fortunate here in Franklin County. We've got a lot of specialized docket programs, a lot of judges that are kind of on board with creative solutions to problems. So that, getting sort of the legal community on board wasn't too hard. You can go ahead and go to the next slide, Eric, if you want to. The goals that we came up with, and Jen, I don't know, whenever you want to jump in, feel free to. But the goals are very similar to the goals that St. Paul kind of covered, so I don't necessarily really want to rehash all that. But you know, everybody gets screened. We've got a risk assessment tool here in Ohio that we use for all our specialized dockets. Pretty much anybody that goes on probation takes this risk assessment. It's called ORAS. They get screened for needs. I will let Jen sort of touch on that a little bit because that's kind of her area. We've got another diversion program for theft diversion called Buckeye Diversion that we kind of stole a lot of our plans where we took Buckeye Diversion and kind of put it into our gun safety program as well. So Jen can touch on that if she wants to.
Yeah, thank you, Justin. So I think something that makes our program unique is that we do utilize a lot of our partners to do certain aspects of our program so that it's not wholly controlled by our office. I think that gives us a lot more kind of visibility within the program, that it's not solely controlled by the city attorney's office. So for example, our risk screening is conducted by the probation department. So we actually have our potential participants go up to the probation department and conduct that assessment with the probation officer. And then we get a report from the probation officer about what level of risk they scored in at on that screener. And then we only take people who screen in low or moderate risk. So anybody who screens high risk is automatically funneled back into traditional prosecution. Similarly, our needs assessment is conducted by our community health worker, who's a partnership that Justin was referring to, that we already had in place from our Buckeye Diversion program, which is based on retail theft offenders. And those community health workers conduct that needs assessment with them one-on-one through a Zoom call where they're actively engaging with the participant and really digging into what needs there might be, what services or resources they might be lacking in. And then my favorite part of the program, and we can move to the next slide, Eric, because I might be getting ahead of myself, is that community impact panel piece. We have partnered with several different community organizations who are anti-gun violence in some manner. And we bring them in for a Saturday. We bring our participants in together and they get instructions on trauma and ways to cope with trauma. We bring in an officer from CPD who talks to them about ways to feel safe that don't involve carrying a firearm. And that I just think has been super impactful. At least it was for me to attend the panel and just kind of see that interaction between the community members and the participants. So moving on to our eligibility requirements, like Justin said, we don't have a lot of misdemeanors that we can really put in this program, but we're trying to think outside the box. And essentially, if you are doing something criminal with a gun, we're going to take a look at it and see if it qualifies. Something that I think that is unique about our case flow is that we do ask for the citing officer's opinion before we offer someone participation in the program. So I reach out to the citing officer anytime we have pre-screened a case to potentially come into the program. I reach out and ask them, explain the program to them and ask them for their opinion on it. Do they think that this would be a good candidate for the program? Do they have any glaring red flags about why they think the person shouldn't be in the program? I think that's really important because it keeps our main stakeholder, which is the police department, involved, like constantly involved and at a very base level. I'm not talking to the chief of police and asking her opinion. I'm talking to the people who are dealing with these potential participants on the ground. And I think that they really respect that. So very similar case flow, I would say, to what you saw with St. Paul. Our program does require forfeiture and destruction of the firearm for every participant. I don't know if that's required for St. Paul or not, but that's something that we just decided kind of in the early on phases. One of our main goals was getting guns off the streets, hopefully convincing participants that they don't need to possess a gun in the future. So that's one of our things.
Yeah, one of the other nice things I think, and that's kind of on the case flow, is one of our specialized dockets is the UP program. So even if people aren't good candidates for our gun safety program, there are other alternatives as well. Like the UP docket is for young adults 18 to 25 with very little to no criminal history that are just need like our safety program can only be 6 months since it's considered like a diversion type program. The up docket and our other specialized dockets can last 2 years because they're actually pleading to something and then going on probation with the chance of getting that case vacated at the end. So if they're a little bit more high needs than what our diversion program can do, or if it's if it's an offense that doesn't really fit what we're trying to do with the gun safety program, there still are other possibilities. Like if they have significant drug issues, mental health issues, things like that, we can still work with them, just not as part of this program. You want to go to the next slide, Eric? Here's just a couple charts we put together. Like the offenses, like we talked about, once again, we don't have that many that actually kind of fall into this program. And so far, it's mostly males. As you can see there, it's like the offenses are failing to tell an officer that they have a gun on them when they're stopped, having weapons while intoxicated, discharging a firearm. And that's basically shooting a gun up in the air. Like if you're shooting at somebody, shooting into a building, that's not going to qualify for this program. So you can go ahead to the next one as well, Eric. So far, I think St. Paul's had theirs in place a little bit longer than we have. And Jen, you can jump in too if you want to. I saw it looks like you were about to say something, but so we've had 16 so far, or 16 screen into the program. 4 have successfully graduated or completed the program so far.
Yeah, and I'm anticipating a successful completion next week. Actually, I just got a good report from the community health worker on one of our participants. So, but yeah, like Justin said, our program's a little bit smaller. We're looking at all of the cases that we see that are misdemeanors that involve a gun, and offering it to everybody that we can based on that pre-screening model. But we're a little bit of a slow start. So yeah, and then for our goals moving forward, obviously, we'd like to increase our participants. I anticipate we'll have more charges forthcoming. We just had, as Joe mentioned, a recent overhaul in our gun legislation. So kind of taking away some of the regulations, but providing more maybe avenues for us to engage with people who have come into contact with law enforcement and are in possession of a gun. So we're just hoping to increase that. And while we do that, maintain that participant satisfaction and adapt the program based on their feelings. So we do have that exit survey that we ask them to complete. I can tell you that the main thing I hear from participants on those exit surveys is that they wish that they could have the gun back, which, like I said, was something that was a non-starter for us. It's kind of a small price to pay, I guess, to get their charge dismissed. But that's the main thing that they say they'd like to get the guns back. But and then obviously we're just going to try to keep our relationships good with our community partners and hopefully increase the people who participate in that community impact panel that I mentioned. And I will go ahead and maybe stop, Eric, if you want to give enough time for any questions.
Thank you so much to all of our presenters and all of the people that have participated. At this time, we could use this time for anybody who is currently attending to ask questions in the questions and answers box, and we could go question by question.
I actually wanted to ask Jen something, because I know when we started with your program, the police relationship with the prosecutor's office was not the strongest. Have you seen an improvement in that?
I personally have, just because I think that I'm getting a good response from the officers when I reach out to them about the cases. I think that having that mechanism in place, that we're always notifying them, always asking for their opinion on every case, is really beneficial, because like I said, it gives them a lot of ownership over the charges that we're dealing with, and allows them to feel like we are taking their opinions into consideration. So I think it definitely has. I don't know overall with the whole office if it has, but at least I think that this program, we're doing our part to kind of maintain that relationship and maintain that strong connection.
We have a great question from Paulina that doesn't seem to be directed towards anyone in particular, but everyone. How have you gone about securing funding without the use of fines and fees?
Well, I can start that question, or the response, I should say. Funding can always be an issue, and we have been fortunate to utilize some of the funding that we have for some of our other alternative to traditional prosecution programs, meaning our diversion program, our ethos programming, particularly for our gun diversion programming. What we do is we refer to it as a diversion plus, and so it's diversion, but it is also through we also utilize ethos, and we are still working off some grant funding that we received from our city council, from a federal grant. And again, as I did mention, we were fortunate enough to be able to work with the Joyce Foundation, who did provide us with some seed money to assist us in this venture. I don't know what Columbus's experience is, but that was our experience and is our experience.
Thank you so much. Do we have any other additions to that, or?
Yeah, I was just going to echo what Jess said. We were also fortunate to receive grant money from the Joyce Foundation through this program, and our grants sort of officer within our office also secured additional grant funding for our community health workers. So that kind of filled the gap that we were dealing with our community health workers in our other diversion program. And so that has kind of facilitated the funding of this. But I haven't found that our program really requires that much as far as like capital to get started. We ended up using some funds for providing lunch for the participants for that community impact panel, but all of the community partners participated, free of charge, and didn't obviously have any kind of fees associated with that. So that's kind of how we've kept our program cost-free.
Thank you so much. It looks like we have another question from Veronica that says, hello, thank you for your leadership on this front, everyone. My question is whether your respective states offer statute diversion programs that would otherwise compete and or qualify these same gun charges to seek permission from the judiciary. I ask because California offers Penal Code 1001.95 for the misdemeanor firearm matters that does not expressly exclude firearm or misdemeanor charges, but the tailored approach to reduce recidivism with particular care is so motivating to figure out how to develop.
I can answer for Ohio. We don't really have any statute that would compete with us, nor would it invalidate our program. Ohio is kind of odd in that every place where there is a judicial diversion program or specialized docket, I'm using diversion program in this context. It's not really diversion. It is a to get a specialized docket, they have to apply to the Ohio Supreme Court and be officially blessed by the court. Here in Ohio, the rules are very loose as to what a prosecutor's office can do. So technically all of our diversion programs are plea offers as opposed to a full-on court-endorsed diversion. We, however, went to the court and asked for our municipal court, I should say. We went to the judges and asked them if they'd be willing to hold these cases open, for example, for the period of time they would need to commit complete diversion. Hopefully, I know that's kind of a roundabout way to answer your question, but that's the best I got.
And in Minnesota, the ability to offer diversion lies with the prosecution. So we are fortunate that we have both statutory and rule authority to be able to do that, which is why, similar to Ohio, this is a prosecutor-led diversion program. And if we are doing things the way in which we think we're doing, these folks will not see the inside of a courtroom, which means that they would also not see a judge. So we are fortunate that way. I know that every state has their own rules on this area. So again, we are just fortunate that we were working within the rules in Minnesota.
Thank you so much. We have one final question before we close out. Were there any particular resource your office utilized in applying for grants and securing private funding? What did your strategy entail?
I can answer from our office's perspective. As I mentioned, we're a decently sized office. We have 176 employees. One of those employees is somebody who full-time works on seeking out and applying for grants. And so that's how we did it. She's always on the lookout for a new grant or some other project we can work on. And we've been lucky enough to secure a bunch of those.
And from the St. Paul City Attorney's Office, our entire office is about 100 people, and in the CRIM division with attorneys and support staff, we're just shy of 50. So we do not have a designated person. We do our best to try to reach out and find grants when they are available, but we're all carrying caseloads, and sometimes it's also about being in the right place at the right time. So unfortunately, I'm not very helpful in being able to say, yeah, here's where we go, here's where we look. But there are resources out there. There are a lot of work. We acknowledge that.
Great. Thank you so much, everyone, for your time and sharing all of your expertise with us today. This was a very informative webinar, and for anybody who would like to watch it again or pass this out in the office, this webinar and all of the materials will be publicly available on APA's website, YouTube channel, and membership database within 3 to 5 business days. So that concludes our webinar for today. So thank you so much, everybody, and I hope everyone has a great rest of their week.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.